when I had the implosion of ministry before I came here, church I pastored in Charlotte. I mean, and that might be actually an interesting podcast sometime to kind of unpack that, because a lot of people have gone through it.
Yeah, you and I both have walked through.
It's crazy, and
like that,
you know what? That would actually be a good little series of little like miniature versions of like just do 3 of them about the mean side of church that pastors often go through. That I think most people think it's there, but they don't realize. And,
sure.
Well, anyway, I mean, it happened to us, and I had pastors all over the country calling me. Fascinating. Pastors, I had no idea how they even knew. Like, I could never trace the connection. And these were pastors that were sending money to us, but then also who were saying, you need to know that everybody knows what happened and everybody knows why, and this will be the best thing that ever happened to you. I mean, I heard that over and over, and it did. It provided some comfort, because there is in the back of your mind, like, I hope people don't think I did something. And when I had like the deacons of that church sit me down in the middle and actually said to me, we've been meeting for 4.5 hours. It was on a Sunday. And I knew. I mean, everybody knew. I guess they thought I didn't know. But anyway, they said, you've done nothing wrong doctrinally, theologically, sexually, financially. There was like 6 words, morally, and there was another one. You've done nothing wrong in any of those categories. Yeah, like ethically. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I know. And they said, but we wanted to go back to the way it was before you came. That's what they told me. And so I left, long story short. We'll unpack that one day just for posterity's sake and just a little in-depth study of it. But the next Sunday we were in church. Yeah. A different church, but we were in church.
If you would have shown back up.
Hey, y'all. That
so is this
weird.
where I preach? Or
Who you got preaching today?
He's terrible.
Oh man, it was weird. I mean, it was. I mean, we've always been, when we travel, when we go on vacation, I find a local church.
Sure.
So I do take it serious, not just from the pulpit as a preaching point, but I take being in church serious as a lifestyle, and that's one of the things I keep trying to communicate to our congregation as well as to my kids, because Amy's in the same boat as me, but. We are Christians. It's not simply a belief system. It's a way of living, right? And so we live differently.
Do you try different denominations when you're vacationing?
I have, yeah. I mean,
we've done that.
I don't go to, yes. So we've plenty of time. I mean, like our default would be probably Pentecostal,
I went to a Mormon church. They were asking about you. But
that would be a different denomination for sure. I would call that a whole other religion. So
they were just checking to see how you're doing.
Yeah, how's Brian? We've been meeting with him. Yeah,
we miss him. We have a planet reserved for him.
Yeah. Hey, that's probably. I am apostate of apostates at that church, at the Mormon church. But we'll go to Pentecostal. We won't go to a charismatic. It kind of depends on where we are and what there is.
Okay, you'll go to a Pentecostal church, but you won't go to a charismatic church.
Yeah.
Tell,
like, why?
Yeah, I mean, like I know what for me what the differences are, what I've observed. I mean, each church is different, but
theology is. I mean, a Pentecostal church has good theology.
Yeah,
I mean, they'll have some points of doctrine that we might disagree on. I mean, but they wouldn't be
losing
primary.
Your salvation.
Yeah, I would disagree with that. But many Pentecostals that I know and love, including one who mentored me years ago, he'd be more Arminian in that, which means you could lose your salvation. But the Pentecostals that I know and met and have studied and read, they don't believe you can get saved, lose it, get saved, back and forth and back and forth. It's not that. It's, and the way that they will say it is God's a gentleman and he won't force you to remain with him, something along those lines. And so, I would disagree with that. But we'll be in heaven for eternity together talking about it. You know, I mean, that's not a salvific doctrine, but that would be a good example.
I'm married a Pentecostal.
My wife was mentored for years and years by Pentecostal. And so, and often in Charlotte, when I was pastoring, we would take a Sunday off and go to a Pentecostal church. I mean, so now charismatic, their theology is wacko. It's all over the map. The Bible almost is secondary to the charismatic proper.
You ever
That
seen
doesn't mean
the
that-
show Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Yeah.
The games are made up and the points don't matter.
It's kind of like that. Yeah. Charismatics are more into their emotions and feelings, and then they mislabel it as spiritual. And it's almost, in my opinion, their way of blaming the Holy Spirit for their insanity of theology.
Sure.
And when you look across particularly Christian music today, a lot of your bizarre churches are also spitting out music that's actually pretty good. So it's been confusing to me. How can a charismatic church with a pastor who's unbiblically heretical, and yet they put out music that's halfway decent? So.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point. And I get that question a lot, even since I've been here, of, why won't we do this song? Tell me we're not doing songs from Hillsong or Bethel or whomever, pick your poison. And, my response for the whole time I've been in ministry has been the same. Like, I take the song for what it is, just because I know plenty of people who are horrible humans but do good things.
Yeah.
And they give very generously, or they, have changed people's lives with, things that but they're horrible people.
Yeah.
And so you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, it's the same way with reading theology or reading books on certain doctrines, because there are men and women who wrote wonderful books on theology or doctrine or devotion, later in life did something stupid.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to one of my professors. I mean, I changed Bible colleges to go study under Dr. Norman Geisler. And I did for years, and I met with him one-on-one many times. And he was an author that I looked up to as far as his theology. I asked him one time, I said, I'm reading a book by a guy. The book is really good. The guy just came out as, I think he had a moral failure of adultery or something like this. And I mean, this was 20 years ago. I said, what do you think I should do when I read a book by somebody who did something wrong? And then I said, or what if this person wrote 10 books, but then I read one of them and one of those books is not right? And Dr. Geisler said, still read it. He said, Brian, there are books that I've written that I no longer agree with, right? And I was like, oh, okay.
I don't
that's a really
agree
good
with
point.
me.
Yeah. And I said, that's it. Because, I mean, by the time I said that, the book, there are books that he had written 30 years prior.
Sure.
And he's learned so much more since then. So, yeah, he's with the Lord now. But anyway, all that to say.
I'm with you, man. Like,
the charismatics I avoid.
I don't prescribe to this.
Charismatic churches I avoid.
Well, I think it's part of our cancel, pardon the
interesting pun
there. The cancel culture we have now, it's like if somebody does something you don't agree with, boom, shut the door, turn out the lights, send them away.
Well, we all would be canceled. We all should be canceled.
Yeah.
Not just would be,
and
should
so
be.
it's, I'm a big believer in redemption and restoration, but at the same rate, it's like the human brain evolves, the human body evolves, the human emotion evolves, the human landscape has evolved. And so it's, if we disregard evolution, not meaning creation, but just the evolution of the human mind and the heart and the emotions and human spirituality, we miss so much, and I mean, you can call it maturity if you want to call it that as a believer. But it's, things I said as a young worship leader that I meant with a good heart, and that was with the understanding that I had, I would no longer say now.
Yeah, I think there's reason for us to categorize error,
Sure.
right? I mean, sometimes a person will bring a statement or a message or a book to me and say, isn't this heretical? And I'll say, well, hang on, that's not heretical. That could be heterodoxy, or it could be he just misspoke, or it can be just an error. Like, not everything is either factual or heretical. Like, those are two very different things, Right. So there's some categories. Yeah. And, there are things that I've said for sure that I didn't believe that I said it. And I went back and listened, and I was like, oh, sure enough, I said that.
Yeah.
It's just,
I knew I was wrong.
Yeah. If you talk enough, you're going to say something stupid, If you talk enough, it's, whether it's accidental and you just misspeak and didn't catch yourself. I mean, I was watching a funeral. I was attending a funeral, and the man speaking, he wasn't the pastor. He was like a family friend, an uncle or something like that. And he was just speaking on behalf of the family. And he kept referring to one of the sons by the wrong name. I think the son was Justin. He kept saying Jason. Everyone knew he knows the kid's name is Justin. He just misspoke. Yeah. So at that point, you don't stand up and scream. You don't even know the kid. You don't even know who this people. Of course not. He just misspoke. Give him a break, right? It's an emotional moment. But I think pastors sometimes do that. The question is, when they're challenged, do they back off and fix it, or do they double down and say, no, this is what I believe firmly?
Yeah.
Also, the question is, I mean, someone can also preach the truth, but live very contradictory. You know, so you see that often in pastoral offices. You'll have a man who's a phenomenal communicator, a phenomenal theologian.
Yeah.
But then you find out he's got an affair happening with 15 different women over the last 20 years. And so, okay, well, now do we discount the truth he gave because he lives so separately from the truth? So I think there are things that we need to consider. And all of that in my mind goes into it. Honestly, some of the, we got onto this because you were asking Pentecostal versus charismatic. I mean, some of the charismatic churches that are putting out wacko things there, part of my concern is, the song is good, but I don't want to pretend as if the church from which it came is good or worthy, because I want to protect the congregation from error.
Sure.
We were talking about Mormonism earlier, and I know full well, because I grew up Mormon, I know the damage that can be done to a person, to a family, to generations, when your core knowledge of God is completely flawed, So there is a part of me that wants to protect the congregation,
Yeah, that, for us in the worship ministry at least, and I don't know, it probably goes without saying for you just because of the nature of what you do, but, every song that we sing, whether in our blended service or modern service, there's a bit of a litmus test, that it has to pass from a theological standpoint in order for us to sing it. And there are a lot of good songs that are out there theologically that you can't sing, So, I mean, there's so many things that go into it. It's not just, I heard this on the radio, we're going to sing it. And maybe it didn't work for our context. So that's, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot more that goes into it, and same with preparing a sermon. It's not just your thoughts.
Oh, there are plenty of things.
It's not the opinions of Brian.
Yeah, there are plenty of things when I'm putting together a sermon that I know the statement is true, but it's bad timing.
Yeah.
I mean, there could be something going on politically. There could be something going on culturally, and it could be received in the completely wrong way in which I mean it. And so there are times where I'm like, this statement, when I'm editing, I mean, I spend as much time editing out as I do putting in. And there was a guy yesterday, where were we? I was here at church, but it's before service. It was one of our ushers or something. I was walking around shaking hands, and he was joking, and he said something like, well, have you finished your sermon? Is it ready? And I was like, I'm never finished with a sermon. I mean, I'm editing in the pew in my head.
Sometimes I don't know what I'm saying until I hear myself say it.
I get up there in the pew, and I'm like, in the pulpit, and I'm like, okay, let's make sure. So I definitely fall into the category of pastors who the sermon that I'm about to preach, I've been working on for 20 years, not just the previous week. So
we live in the culture of Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts and things that are taken out of context. And I mean, you and I both know a bunch of pastors and preachers and evangelists in the world that we lived in for a while that they just do. They're saying as much outlandish stuff as they possibly can in a 40-minute sermon, hoping that a minute and a half lands on a YouTube clip that will go viral. And book them on conference circuits or whatever else, man. It's just, I don't know. That's just gross to me, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful you don't. That's not your bag. It's not mine either.
Yeah, well, when I do conferences, they're in some third world country.
Nobody knows you're doing.
Nobody knows who I am, and I'm not making a single penny.
Yeah.
And it's costing me and Amy for me to get there, and it's costing our church for me to get there, and that's what I pursue. And I do know guys that, desperately pursue a platform and a spotlight, and I just don't want it. It terrifies me. Well, plus, let's just be honest, here in the U.S., there's too many conferences. Everybody wants to be the expert, and so I just. But when I get an opportunity to go do a conference in a third world country where pastors have nothing, I was sharing with the congregation. I did a conference with a buddy of mine in Cuba last fall. I think it was November. We were there, and man, it really affected me in a very emotional way. I'd never seen anything like it, where the government truly oppresses its own people. I mean, I've never seen such a bizarre
Yeah, there's a
concept.
difference in not having anything and oppression.
Yeah, like I mean, I've been to Kenya 100 times for 20 years. I mean, I'll go to Kenya every year. The government doesn't oppress its own people. It's not to say there aren't political issues, of course,
Sure.
right? But when you go to Cuba, and I've been to around something like 30 countries where I've done ministry, never seen anything like Cuba. Now, again, I'm sure there's other countries that are as bad or worse, just not that I've personally eyewitnessed.
Yeah.
So when I was in Cuba and I saw it, I mean, you can ask the guys that were there with me. The last 2 days of our trip, I mean, I about couldn't talk. I couldn't just sit. I wanted to be alone and just pray. I mean, we were at a restaurant having dinner the last night with our local guest, or host rather, and I kept having to walk away. I mean, it was just difficult for me. But
yeah.
I mean, and I shared with our church when I got back, like, look, I want to tell you something about the conference y'all just sent me to. You know, I'm staying in a room that most people here in our culture would never want to stay in those kind of conditions, right? I mean, it's not a Ritz-Carlton, right? And the food is truly beans and rice for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner.
Prison cell would be nicer.
I mean, I took a pastor who used to be here. He's at another church now. I took him with me on one of these trips in Africa, and we went across several countries. We went Kenya, Uganda, Burundi, Rwanda, and we did a conference for pastors and Christians in each. I mean, these are extremely impoverished nations. And I mean, some of the hotels we stay in, you know, we're pulling back the sheets to make sure there's no animal under them. And, you know, we'd leave to go do something, come back if they get the animals out again. I mean, I'll spare some of the details because they're horrible.
Just the idea of like a sloth in your bed.
Yeah, I mean.
Without you knowing.
I mean, Amy used to go with me. I mean, before we had kids, she would go with me. We would do Amazon jungle work, and we would go to these unreached tribes and, you know, just minister to and take medicines and the gospel. And we're staying in a tent in the middle of the jungle, and you're hoping that all goes well and you wake up in the morning, you know. But anyway, when we were there in Cuba, there was this pastor that came up to me afterwards, and he was on the other end of the whole island. So it was about a 9 to 11 hour drive by car, but he didn't have a car. He rode a bike. And so he wanted to introduce his wife to me. You know, the event had just ended. We'd been preaching for almost a week and all the things we were doing for these pastors. But anyway, he comes up to me. It's an older man. He was probably in his 60s. And he had his wife. He introduced his wife to me. And he was just thanking me for the event. He said, we don't ever get anything like this to encourage pastors. And he said, I want to share with you how God provided to get me and my wife to this conference. And I said, okay. So he says, you know, I have a bicycle, you know, because they wouldn't be able to afford gas. You know?
Sure.
He said, I have a bicycle, but this is all I have is this one bicycle. But I really wanted my wife to be able to come. And it would have taken, you know, a couple days to bike pedal, you know, all the way to where we were. Well, someone knew that he wanted to go and said, well, I have another bicycle, but it's broken. Like it's broken in half, basically. And there's no front wheel.
Just a sickle.
Yeah. Like I guess, yeah. Not a bike, but a Una. And he said, so I was able to take, and he showed me, he had taken like rope and different things. And he basically made that second broken bicycle into a thing that he could like attach to his bicycle.
Oh, like a sidecar.
And he put his wife on it.
That's awesome.
So he biked her all the way across the island of Cuba to get to the event just to be there where we were doing this conference.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he pedaled his wife for 2 days, you know.
That's wild.
The two of them across the country. I mean, it's amazing hearing. So, yeah, those are the things that I'm interested in doing. And so, yeah, looking at ways to continue. I've been invited to a few more, you know, I got invited to a few more countries to come do some of this work in. And what I'm trying to do now is take some of the stuff that I do, put it in paper, and then have it translated so that when I go and do an event somewhere, I can give all this stuff, you know, to the pastors. I mean, all this stuff costs money. So I'm talking to Brandon about some ideas of how we can generate the funds to produce these things, to take it to these pastors when I go. And anyway.
You've been invited to like Fiji or
Somewhere in the Caribbean?
Australia.
Unfortunately, no. That would be
Western
nice.
Mexico.
Sounds like you're interested.
If you need to travel, buddy, I know a guy.
Yeah.
I know a guy.
Sure you do.
I mean, Africa sounds great,
Yeah.
but
I know people who are missionaries to some of these amazing areas.
Yeah.
They've got it rough because they have to like convince somebody. You know what I mean?
they're raising support.
Yeah.
Like, bro, you're going on vacation.
There's no lie. We have a country that has reached out to us through Trent, our our mobilization guy, that want us to come help them. It's two different church planters, missionaries that aren't together. They're two separate ministries, right? But they're both in the same city. They're both in Nice, France. And they're like, please help. And they're like, no one wants to help because they think we're over here living in the lap of luxury. And they're like, man, we can't get anybody to come help us because we're in Nice,
I don't mind.
I know. I'm like,
I love a good croissant.
I'm sure we can get a trip together. Yeah.
God.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, yeah, it's trying to convince people to, this is a noble cause and we're the cause, and you're going to Nice.
Yeah, you're in Bora Bora. Yeah, for such a time as this.
I'm on the Amalfi Coast, suffering for the Lord, really.
Yeah. And the truth is, it is a worthy.
Let's call it persecution.
Yeah. It is a worthy mission area, man.
Wonder if the disciples had that thought, when they were scattered, like Luke 10, right? And Jesus sent them out 2 by 2. And he was like, you know what, James and John, because I love you boys, you get to go to the Amalfi Coast. Thomas, you have a doubting issue, so you and Judas get to go to Kenya.
Yeah, we're sending you to the Sahara.
Where there's literally no one, but find somebody. Good luck.
Yeah, I love Kenya, incidentally.
Yeah.
Now, if God were to say, Brian and Amy, I'm sending you to Greece, Amy would be packing our bags before I go.
She's got a bag ready.
She loves
she's got a bag ready.
Yeah.
Speaking of world traveling, we have 2 mission teams that came back.
That was cool.
This past weekend, so Honduras and Nepal. One of the things Brandon pointed out, if you haven't watched the service, go to our YouTube page and you can do that. One of the things Brandon pointed out, he said while they were going to bed in Honduras, Trent and his team in Nepal were waking up to get ready to go. So the sun never set on ministry.
It was really cool how he said that. I leaned over to Amy and I was like, that was actually a really cool point.
I know. Way to go, Brandon.
I know.
Gosh, way to go.
Man, way to go.
You get extra cool points.
That's right. So yeah,
No
when
raise,
when
but you
one
get
team
cool
was
points.
getting up, the other was going to bed.
Yeah,
when
I
that
thought
team
they were
got up, the
awesome.
other was going to bed. It's really cool.
And it's just a reminder, I mean, and I'm sure you feel the same way, whenever you go to these other countries or other parts of the world, and even in the United States, we get so contextualized here in Snellville or even at Church on Main. Let's shrink it down a little bit more, and to realize that the work of God is happening and thriving in other parts of our community, but even in other parts of the country and the world as well. I don't know, we serve the same God who's doing a different work everywhere. And that's really, really, really cool to me.
It is cool. It's one of the reasons I like doing foreign missions so much.
Yeah.
Very often, almost always, I go by myself too.
Yeah.
Just go and get it done and come back. So I am trying to take a team.
Unless you go to Greece.
I don't have any trouble getting people to go to Greece with me, man. Looking to go to Greece again next fall. I'm trying to catch up these trips. I've got so many people who want to go.
You're doing Germany in August. Right?
Germany's August. That trip's already locked in, though. It's too late for anybody else to join. We got 18, which is going to be a fantastic trip. Smaller group, we can be real nimble. We can go see more sites because we don't have to wait for everybody to get through. You know what I mean? We were in Israel last summer, and the week before, our guide had a group that was 200 people.
Oh.
200, that's over. That's too much. Now, people think it's so much fun, there'll be 200 of us, but what they don't think...
6 hours in customs.
It's awful because you don't get to really move on until everybody's through. So there's this one place that we were, it's Hezekiah's Tunnel, and it's right there. You start in Jerusalem, you get down to the city of David, and it's in the Old Testament. It's where the tunnel was built through the mountain, and they started on both sides, met in the middle, so they could get water, to the inhabitants of Jerusalem if they were under attack. Well, anyhow... You get to walk through it, and it's phenomenal. It's my favorite thing to do in Jerusalem as far as a tour goes. And so, but it takes you a while. I mean, it'll take you. You go through and you check in with your ticket. You go through these little presentations that explain to you how it was built and why it was built and the history of it. And you're kind of going down till you get to where the tunnel is, and then you get to walk the entire length of the tunnel, and then you come out of the Pool of Siloam, which is really awesome. I mean, this funnel feeds the Pool of Siloam, which is really cool, which was recently discovered. Well, anyhow. The guide said, look, it took us an hour, and it probably took us an hour and a half. He said, and there were like 60 of us. He said, last week we had a group of 200, took 16 hours. 16 hours. He said, the people who were in the beginning of the group, that went through it 16 hours prior were so furious because they're sitting on a bus for hours. So people were like taking a cab just to get back to the hotel and say, forget it.
Yeah, I'll see ya.
Because you go through this tunnel one by one.
Yeah.
It's super narrow.
Sure.
So once you start that part, you're just going through. And if somebody like, oh, hang on a second, then for 200 people behind you.
Let me get a picture.
That's what happened. Because you see carvings.
Didn't like that one.
And people are taking pictures and, some people that are tall are having to duck. Anyway, it took them 16 hours. He said, I won't ever do that again. So anyway, we're looking at Israel next April.
Okay.
April 30th to May 9th, I want to say, assuming everything's safe. Everyone says, well, if it's not safe, what will you do? Well, then we'll cancel it.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
You just don't go.
Just don't go. And then we're also looking at Greece, Footsteps of Paul, again next year, 2025, in the fall. So I would do Israel in the spring, Greece in the fall, and that would kind of catch us up.
Yeah.
And then we're looking at Italy, a Christian tour of Italy, spring of 2026.
Oh, I do love pizza.
That's the only reason you would go to Italy. I mean, why else would you go to Italy?
I've heard the pasta's okay.
Well, one way to find out.
I mean, Paul had something to do with it, but
Something.
I'm there for the pizza. Let's be honest.
The food. I'm sure they have good food in Italy.
The Lord knows my heart. He knows my needs. Okay. I was going to pull this whole mean trick on our podcast listeners and say, look, guys, we're done with the book of Mark, but we're not even we're a little over halfway.
Yeah, we're over half.
Mark chapter 11, we're locked in.
We just started talking because it was already recording.
Yeah.
We didn't ever do the whole like, hey, man, good to see you.
Oh, good to see you.
Hey, man.
Good to see you.
Yeah, welcome back.
How,
were you gone? You were.
Yeah, I was gone last week.
Yeah, but you're back.
I am back. It was a great trip. I was in Fort Smith, Montana. I went to like a pastoral retreat center. It was amazing.
That's all I've heard is how great it is.
No phone. No. Ironically, I was telling the choir about it Sunday. One of my choir members, one of our basses, his son worked for the place I went called Refuge.
Oh, no way.
And he was a fishing guide and one of the staff members there.
No way, that's cool.
Or, I'm sorry, his grandson. Okay. He wasn't there while I was there. He worked for him several years ago, but he knew all about it and the good that they do. So
that's really
anyway,
neat.
They just take pastors, business leaders, Christian leaders of organizations, whatever. They bring them to this house on the Crow Reservation in Fort Smith, Montana. And there's no cell signal.
I know I called you a couple times.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I was just trying to see how things going, and it would just go straight to voicemail.
Yeah. There's nothing out there. If you want cell signal, you got to drive like an hour and a half to Billings.
Really, it's like that.
I mean, you get it along the way, but anyway, it just the vastness of the land was unbelievable. Got to trout fish, which I love to fish, so that was a lot of fun. But I just got to talk to guys who were in the same trenches that I am, man, and it was really refreshing, and the Lord, man, gave me some clarity on some things I've been praying for years. And so I would highly recommend turning this thing off.
Amen to that.
For a little while and seeing what clarity can bring. But it was real refreshing. Came back Friday to my daughter's dance recital. She had her first dance recital. She was adorable.
Of course.
The other 3 hours were horribly painful, but her minute and a half
that's how it is.
was worth it.
Yeah.
I was like, man, this is parenting right here. This is parenting.
It is. Sit through a lot of not fun to get to the little bit that
and
is.
You had, y'all have two kids, and it's, it's a weird kind of conundrum you find yourself in when one child has an event, the other child has an event.
We had to divide and conquer plenty of times.
Yeah. But so that was the plan. But then little Miss was real upset that Daddy wouldn't be there at the dance recital. So we made Hampton go. I cannot tell you how good of a sport he was.
Oh, cool.
But he had to miss his baseball game, his T-ball game.
Yeah.
And so he missed his T-ball game. And on the way there, I said, buddy, I'm so sorry. But, I mean, this is what family does. We sacrifice for each other, trying to give this big life lesson. Just like, man, you're doing this for your sister.
Remember this.
Oh, yeah. Man, I was like so idyllic about it. And he said, Daddy, I'm going to miss my snacks.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I'll get you a snack.
Right.
Buddy.
You're right.
I'll get you a snack.
I loaded that boy up. Yeah, I did whatever he wanted. What snack do you want? None of your friends will have this. So anyway, we learned a lot of good, valuable lessons and sat through a lot of dancing.
Very good.
But it was good, man. The place she goes is in Monroe, Point of Grace dance. and this Christian dance company, and it was really powerful. It was really
Cool.
powerful. I'm going to see how we can integrate them into what we do for Christmas and all that. So, all right, we did the triumphal entry. Hooray, hooray, but not so hooray.
Not so triumphant.
Not so triumphant. And we're on to the fig tree.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is we start to see Jesus's anger might be a good word for it, frustration, and you pointed this out yesterday, what gives a lot of people pause and, kind of a reason to follow Jesus is actually more of a reason to follow Jesus, because he exhibits his grace and his compassion in the middle of his frustration and his anger, and shows us through these parables how we are as humans, and our propensity as humans to not produce fruit in the middle of the season we should be. So that was a beautiful reminder to me, at least yesterday. And I nudged my wife. I'm like, this is convicting to you, right? But it's just a good reminder. Like, man, you may look good from the outside from a distance, but what's going on inside is killing you.
Yeah, that was when I was putting that together. I mean, so much of what I'm doing when I'm putting together a message is like, okay, step number one, let's make sure I understand what this means. Let's get the context. Let's get the historical context. Let's get the context of the greater point of the whatever letter I'm in this case, the Gospel of Mark. And then once I feel like I've understood it and I've researched it and I've looked at what countless other men smarter than me over the years have pulled out of it and learn and take and then whittle, down to a message that'll fit within our time. But then go, okay, now why does this matter to us? What do we take from this? And those statements were convicting to me. I mean, it came out of my pen as I was writing, but man, it was convicting. I mean, the tree looked healthy from a distance, but there was no fruit on it. And as Jesus got closer to it and the apostles got closer to it, there's no fruit. So it looked good from a distance. And so starting to make that realize, okay, Israel looked healthy from a distance. For a lot of us, we look healthy from a distance, but looks can be deceiving. So that was a convicting. And in this context, it was bearing no fruit. Now when we get to next week and he connects it to the cleansing or the clearing of the temple, it's going to bring more of it to light as well. So I look forward to that.
So when you talked about the historical context, give us a little insight on how Israel looked healthy from the outside, but inside
well, all the system was working.
Fruit, right?
So whenever you have a system, think of it like the type theories of truth, right? So you have one theory of truth that's a coherent theory. Then you have another theory of truth that would be a corresponding theory.
Okay.
There's others, but let's just take those two. Both seem true to those on the inside. So if you're in a coherent theory, let's just continue to pick on Mormonism because that's an example we were talking about earlier. If you're a Mormon, inside the Mormon system, everything makes perfect sense. And your detractors seem unreasonable. They seem like they just are somehow jealous or angry or they don't get it. Because if you are on the inside, you're in the storm, everything coheres perfectly with itself. Okay, when you get outside and you begin to compare it to what corresponds to reality, you finally realize this coheres perfectly within itself, but it's like a house of cards. And if you touch it in the right spot, it collapses.
Yeah, sure.
Right? So a house of cards looks good. Just don't touch it. Right? Don't challenge it. The corresponding theory of truth doesn't matter if you're on the inside or outside. It corresponds to reality. So what would have made Israel or the temple or the religious system of Israel look healthy is the system was operating. I mean, look, we've got a temple right here in the heart of our, nation. We've got up on the mountaintop, we can, this temple is magnificent. It's filled with gold and wealth. And we have synagogues set up around the whole nation. And we have, the Sanhedrin made up by the religious leaders. And we have Pharisees and we have Sadducees and we have scribes and all that was happening, the schools, everything was built around the Judaic rabbinical system. Yeah. So it looked healthy and thriving. The problem was, as Jesus kept saying to them, is you've made the law the point, not God.
Yep.
So it looks healthy, but your hearts are far from me. You honor me. He said that. I think it was in Mark
honor
chapter
me
7.
with your lips.
Yeah, these people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me.
Yep.
And so what looks healthy isn't always. And so their system was completely coherent. Problem was, here comes Jesus as the great disruptor. And he's going, okay, you've missed all of these other teachings in the Old Testament that, the teaching from Deuteronomy, you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So you're missing the heart of Psalms. You're missing the love of Song of Solomon. You're missing all these things because you've made it about the check boxes. You've made it about the legal system. In itself, it's coherent. Problem is that coherent system can continue to function, but you're completely detaching yourself from the reality of God and the heart of God
Sure.
and the intention of God, to where you had people who were, injured on a Sabbath, but don't help them because it's Sabbath, And so Jesus comes in and says, hang on, people are not made for Sabbath, but Sabbath for people, right? So if the man's injured, help him. Which of you, if you have an ox and he falls in the pit, you won't rescue the ox out of the pit on a Sabbath? Okay, well, people are more important than an ox. But the rabbis had become so focused on their own system that they're adding to the Bible. I mean, they're adding the Mishnah. They're adding all these other writings that begin to have more or equal authority as the Bible. In fact, leading people, even to this day, that would more study the rabbinical writings more so than the Bible itself.
Yeah.
So those are some of the ways in which the system of Judaism, the system or Israel itself, looked healthy from a distance, but when you got close, they were missing it entirely.
So let's put that in our current context. We live in the Southeast, where cultural Christianity is the way of life. I wouldn't say, I don't know, maybe we're getting to a point to where it's a way of life, but I'd argue it's
Dominant,
largely, the way of life. You have people all over, our church in particular, but all over churches, period, that are business leaders, workers, folks who aren't in vocational ministry, where their life is centered around checking a box. Did I do this? And so this lifestyle of checking the box, of task-oriented things, when you translate that over into Christianity, when Jesus says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments, how can we settle in our hearts that our desire to keep those commandments is not just to fend off the wrath of God, but out of a heart of love?
Well, I think it's just going to depend on the foundation of your obedience, right?
Sure.
So I remember Amy and I had been married. We were somewhere in our first year of marriage, and I was flying to Kenya, and I was on a...
You've been there a lot.
I've been there a lot. Yeah, I was going to Kenya, and I was flying somewhere between Amsterdam and Nairobi.
You like Kenyan coffee?
Sure, I guess.
Can
I put a lot of
cream and
hazelnut?
sugar.
Yeah, can I put
Let's
hazelnut
be honest.
vanilla in there?
I like Ethiopian blends.
Yeah,
they're really good.
But you actually are like the coffee snob that can tell the difference.
Yeah,
all of my coffee tastes like vanilla and caramel to me.
It's all. You don't care if it's Folgers or whatever.
Yeah, I don't even want it.
That's funny.
I'll drink it. But anyway, so we're somewhere in the air between Amsterdam and Nairobi. The guy sitting next to me is the head of psychology at the Ohio State University. And it's about 20 years ago, so whoever that was. I still remember his name. He's a nice guy. And he was Jewish professor. And we got to talking. He says, why are you headed to Kenya? And I explained, work with an organization that we help pastors, we plant churches, we build orphanages, and I'm going there to help, do that. What about you? And he says, I'm with PETA, and Kenya is about to open a brand new chicken factory, and I'm going there to meet with some other folks from PETA US.
Did you not just have a heyday?
Oh
my goodness.
His wife was actually in between us.
Like if God couldn't have teed that up,
it was phenomenal.
Did you pull out all your hunting pictures?
9 hours. For 9 hours, we're talking about this. His wife was in the middle of us, and at one point she goes, "Stop." And she threw her hands up and goes, "Switch seats with me. I'm not getting in the middle of this anymore."
Lady.
So she swapped seats. But
how you feel about bow hunting?
We talked about why is he protesting chickens in Kenya, he's a Jewish man that has a sacrificial system. His Jewish theology was so flawed.
Is he Orthodox Jew?
No, he was cultural Jewish.
Yeah.
I mean, he was literally a Jew. He was born Jewish, so he was Jewish, but he had no knowledge whatsoever of the Old Testament. So we talked through a lot of those things. Anyway, being that he was the head of psychology, I said, I have a question for you. I said, I'm a newlywed. He says, yeah. I said, I can't remember the example I gave, but let's just use this example. My wife wants me to take out the garbage, let's just say. And he says, okay, all right. I said, is it okay for me to take out the garbage because she told me to and I want to avoid an argument? Or do I have to want to take out the garbage? Which is best? He says, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, no, it doesn't matter. Which is best? And he said, I suppose it would be best, psychologically speaking, if the reason you did these things was because you cared for her so deeply, you wanted to please her. And if taking out the garbage pleases her, you'll do it. That would be best. And I was like, okay, well, God is the same way, right? So do we follow him because we don't want to go to hell? Yeah. Okay, fine. Is that best? Because it's very easy to honor God with your lips and your heart be far from him, right? So, I mean, if I tell my son to take out the garbage and he stomps and storms and cusses and yells and flings the door open, slams it behind me, but hey, he took the garbage out. Well, that's one way. Mm-hmm. Or it could be I never have to even bring it up to him.
Yeah, he just does it.
I just notice that he does it and he cares. And if someone were to ask him, Jackson, why did you take out the garbage? Like, my mom and dad do a lot. They work like crazy. My sister and I don't have to work. Mom and dad take care of everything for us. They care for us. The least I can do is take out the garbage. Well, which one would dad appreciate hearing the most? It's obvious. So I think with the, you saying the cultural Christianity, yes, part of the cultural Christianity, legalism, because we may not go around calling ourselves scribes and Pharisees, but we do the same thing. And so we say, well, look, if I don't go to church on Sunday, it's going to look like I don't care. So fine, let me just go to church on Sunday. Sure. Or I'll just make sure to tell people I didn't go, but I watched it online.
That's my favorite.
So I mean, these are the things we've gotten to a point where our freedom, our luxury, our rest has taken priority over our worship, right? And I've always been frustrated that we now refer to worship as singing music. Like that is the encapsulation of what it means to worship.
Well, I mean, listen, I will crucify my own. We made an industry out of worship. We've capitalized on worship to where it's so much more than a lifestyle. It's a genre of music now. And that's how, don't get me started on that.
And so
mess.
You have worshiped if you sing a Christian song. Not you have worshiped if you sacrifice something for yourself in order to give more for kingdom work or mission work or anything like that. I mean, it's so difficult now because there's so many examples. And whatever example I would give from the pulpit, I'm going to get an email later saying, hey, were you talking about me? Because,
Yes, I was.
Usually I say I was talking about you and everyone else in the congregation. That's what I say. I say I was talking about you, I was talking about me, I was talking about my staff, I was talking about the congregation. So the answer is yes. It's about all of us. So, and sometimes I've even said, well, I didn't even know you had this issue until you just confessed it to me, right? So
would you like to talk?
That's happened before too. So anyway, all that to say, no, there's ways in which the cultural Christianity is the unfortunate definition of current Christianity in America. But then again, go with me to these other countries.
Yeah, sure.
And you'll begin to see what it means to really, there were some pictures yesterday from the trips in Nepal and Honduras when they got back and shared some pictures, and you're seeing people who they have nothing but a smile on their face. Yeah. Here, if you have nothing, there's misery. In these places you have nothing and there's a smile on your face, and the reason is they see the value of Christ. Yeah. And so they have nothing but they feel wealthy. In fact, that's when I first began to realize, I mean, it's 20 years ago, the difference between poverty versus poor. And people would say, no, we're not poor. Now they're living in a hovel. They're on a dirt floor. They have a thatch roof. They've never owned a pair of socks or a toothbrush. They've never had ice. They don't see themselves as poor because they see that as a negative mindset. They say, yeah, we have very little, but man, God is good. God loves us. God's blessed us. We have everything in Christ that we need. So it wouldn't even occur to them to be miserable. I mean, it's certainly a mindset. Whereas here, because of the capitalistic culture that we have, value is based on what you possess.
And in Montana, riding through to get to the place, all you see is just landscape, and then this huddle of mobile homes, trailers, and then you see like these little one-off houses in the middle of a huge field that are, it's got an old broken down truck and part of the yard and broken down tractors and all these things. And I asked, the guy that was driving us, I said, do these people just not want better, like for themselves and for their family? Like, how do they go to school? All, because the nearest school is like 45 minutes away. And I saw a school bus drive by. I'm like, that's a monster of a bus ride.
Yeah.
Like, could you imagine? They just said, they don't know any better.
Yeah.
They don't know any better. And I think it was a good reminder to me that sometimes knowledge is not always a good thing, because it makes you aware of things that could cloud your gratitude.
Change your opinion. I've heard it said that comparison is the thief of contentment.
Yeah.
And that's the concept of don't covet. But if you don't know what you don't have, you tend to be happy with what you do.
Sure. Sure.
And that's the way it ought to be, at least.
Yeah. We were sitting at dinner the other night, and we play this little game where everybody's got 2 minutes to talk. Nobody can interrupt. Nobody can ask questions. You have to hold on to your questions again. So everybody gets 2 minutes to either recap your day. You can talk about whatever you want to talk about. And so we were sitting at dinner the other night, and Ellington, she's always got really.
Oh, this is at home. I thought you meant in Montana.
Home, sorry.
I got you.
This is kind of a thing our family does around the table. It's called 2-minute drill. And so you just get everything you want to get out. If you're having a hard day, sad day, great day, any day, or you can ask questions. And then at the end of a 2-minute timer, then somebody can respond. But you have to fill that 2 minutes or just let it sit. Doesn't matter. So she asked a really great question the other day. She said, what's the best thing about being a kid? And so we just let it sit. And so I pulled a Jesus on her and turned around and asked her. I said, what do you think the best thing about being a kid is? And she said, I don't have to work.
Oh, that's good.
And I said, that's a really great answer.
I know some adults that are that way.
And I said, because when you have a job, that means you have responsibilities and you have things you have to pay for. And she said, you and Mom you just take care of all of us. You take care of everything. Mm-hmm. And it was just a beautiful reminder to me, like our Heavenly Father does the same thing. Mm-hmm. That we don't have to worry about anything. We don't have to, and those seasons of our lives, pulling it back to the sermon where we don't feel like we're bearing fruit. We don't feel like we're maybe from the outside we do look great. We have clean clothes. We take a shower, we brush our teeth. Life seems to be going fine. Inside we're dying. Yeah. And how much more does our Heavenly Father want to care for us in those moments, to do that restorative soul work?
And the reality is, everybody I know is going through something.
Yes.
Everybody.
Yes.
I don't know anybody that everything's right.
No.
And I mean, one of the reasons that everyone that I know is going through something is because when I talk to them, they know I'm a pastor, and so they feel the freedom to share, sure. And I'm very thankful that they do. And it absolutely helps inform my sermon planning, Every one of us is going through something. And so, it's that would be really great to have that moment of realization that like your daughter recognizes what all you do to provide, to protect, direct.
I remind her of it when she complains. Like, hey, remember when you said this?
I'm having fun conversations with my kids right now. My son's about to turn 18. My daughter's about to be 19. She's in college. He's about to graduate high school. And we've had conversations with both of them separately where they came to us, my wife and I, saying basically, the same old thing you and I probably did. I'm 18, almost 18, and so therefore, since I'm an adult, I want to be able to have certain freedoms that are consistent with adulthood. And for me, I'm like, you're not an adult. There's not a single area of your life in which you are adulting. I'm the one paying for everything in your life.
You still have 7 years for your brain to fully
what are you
develop.
talking about? You're an adult. You're not an adult. You're 18. All that 18 means is you get to go to jail for your mistakes,
you
not
can,
me.
You can vote and buy a lottery ticket.
That's it, man. You can go to the military.
Yes,
keep it up.
there you go.
So That's what I said. I mean, like, look, I don't want to treat you like a child. I don't, but you're going to still have responsibilities over you, and I'm funding everything, so you're not adulting. When you start adulting, well, in fact, I told my daughter, I said, look, when you get married, 99% of the questions I ask you will go away, but understand when you get married, 100% of my funding goes away, right?
Yeah. So what would you rather trade?
Yeah, you tell me. I can ask questions, now, or I can remove the funding.
Yeah. Oh man, that's good, and it's so true.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Now my daughter and I, we all have such a great relationship. Sure, but when I told her that, she wasn't offended. Yeah. I mean, she laughed and goes, "Okay, I get it. You're right. What does you want to know?" That's what I thought.
No, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I don't even. And here, the funny thing was, I was like, I don't even know. It's your mom that has questions. Yeah. Amy, come here. Ask her. What was it you wanted to ask her? You know?
Man, our kids are 7 and 4, and I'm already saying, "Hey, mom wanted me to ask you."
Yeah. I have no idea. Yeah, something important, I'm sure.
Or here's become my thing recently. I'll look at Ellington. If she does something she's not supposed to do, I was like, "What would mom say?" What would mom say?
Get little bracelets. What would mom say?
Yeah, WWM say.
Yeah.
MS.
Yeah.
That's funny. Oh, man. It's, such a great reminder this week to me. I mean, my big takeaway was, obviously what you said, we look like we're doing well from the outside, but, our hearts, what's going on inside is killing us. Mm-hmm. And to live with that vulnerability to say, like, hey, this is awful. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not doing well. There's, I don't know, man, sometimes a fear of that even in the church, to be honest and be very, I've said this for years. I heard somebody say it, then somebody always said, now I've said it. That's how that progression goes. You should always be authentic, but you should seldom be transparent because not everybody can handle your stuff.
Okay, well, Kellan, I would say this too. You've been in ministry a long time as well. I've been in ministry officially, 20 years.
Yeah.
More than that now. And I can't tell you how many times, I'm sure it's happened to you, where I have shared something and someone has said, you can trust me. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, this is something we're dealing with right now. And
boom.
And so it's like, I'll never do that again.
Yeah.
And look, I know others can have, there are plenty of other people who have similar stories in ministry. This is why most pastors no longer have friends outside of their family and staff. Because every pastor I know who has a large church and a large staff, they eventually stop interacting with the congregation.
Very lonely.
Yeah, it's a loneliness because they've been bitten or betrayed. It happened to me. I mean, Amy and I, we were talking in the beginning of the podcast about this, the church implosion that we went through before we were at this church. So it was 10 years ago now. It was an extreme dishonest, mean betrayal from within.
Yeah.
And these were people that we trusted, people that we knew. And it puts you in a position as the pastor, you can't even say anything. I mean, there was people in the congregation that were so infuriated over what happened to us that they came to us and said, fight it and you'll win. And I was like, really?
Will we though?
So you're telling me that the victory would be to split the church?
Yeah.
And that's why we didn't.
Well, I wanted to say that to you earlier, and I'm glad you brought that back up because it reminded me of this beautiful thing. I mean, I know this is what I struggle with when, and it's happened a couple different times, but there was one in particular instance that was just devastating to the level yours was. And I wanted justice so bad.
Yeah.
Oh, I wanted justice. And, I've got a really close friend of mine who's in the throes of all that right now, who, at a mega church in the Southern Baptist world that is dealing with it. And he won't, I told him, I said, I dealt with it on a smaller scale, but you're going to want justice so badly. But I'm telling you, in the way you want justice, it will never come. It will never come.
That's when you have to embrace vengeance is mine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what you'll have to look at is less of, somebody coming to bat for you or somebody taking up for you. Because that happened. I'm sure it happened in your circumstance too. There were people for me who were like, no, this is not right.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
It doesn't do any good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind. It's very loving. It's very generous. But what it's taken for me and for Shelby, and I'm sure the same for you guys, is sticking it out, coming to a place to where you can still be honest, but you're not always transparent.
Well, for Amy and I too, we spent a lot of time we're going to have to do a podcast
Yeah,
on this.
we'll do it.
We are, but we
We'll do
spent
it.
a lot of time thinking through what is the biblical response. And we spent a lot of time going through Scripture. It was right before Thanksgiving. So I had the week where we were away
Sure.
up in Kentucky, and it's just me and the Bible and Amy, and we had a lot of time to really pour into some Scripture about the right way to respond. I'd love to share some of that sometime. And but we also went radio silent because so many people just wanted to know the story.
Yep.
So many folks were reaching out, calling, texting, showing up at the house that we just went radio silent, even without an explanation. That a year or two later, folks would say, I reached out to you, you never responded. What happened? And I told them I had nothing good to say, so I chose to say nothing.
You did not want to see me in that moment.
This was the moment of complete radio silence, and I'm sorry that probably wasn't good for you,
Yeah.
and I apologize for that because you care for us, and I acknowledge that. But for Amy and I, we didn't want to have to go on an apology tour later and apologize and ask forgiveness for things that we said that we shouldn't have said, not knowing an example, but we just chose to go silent.
Yeah.
So anyway.
It's good stuff. Yeah, we'll do that.
good.
I'm thinking this summer. July is kind of an odd month for everybody. We'll do some of these more topical podcasts to release
Good idea.
for the summer. So
Cool.
maybe less sermon recaps, more life recaps.
I like it.
Wouldn't you like to sit and listen to my life story and Brian's life story?
No.
No,
All right.
me either.
See y'all
Next week we have a couple things. Don't rush them off.
Cleansing of the temple.
Cleansing of the temple is coming up next week. Jesus is throwing tables and
I love it.
whipping.
It's one of my favorite passages of all of
Kicking
Jesus
butt
in the
and
Bible.
taking names.
Man, it's my kind of guy.
Yeah.
I love it.
You're going to get really fired up.
Seriously, I was working on it this morning, I was working on it yesterday. I was working on it Saturday, a couple days ago. I was working on it this morning. I mean, yes, this is my kind of passage.
Yeah. We got that National Day of Prayers this week.
Thursday.
Thursday.
There's some other stupid thing that's happening Thursday too.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't know what it is.
I'm not sure.
Interesting.
But if you would like to wish me a happy birthday in the form of
Rolex,
Rolex or oatmeal cream pies.
Bora Bora.
Bora Bora. I said oatmeal cream pies. You're trying to set me up with
know
the good
you.
stuff. Thank you.
Yeah.
Or a trip to Fiji.
That'd be fine.
I've never been to Fiji.
Same. Yeah.
But I watched a YouTube video once, so it looks nice.
I'm sure it's a little different.
There was a deal I saw on YouTube. It was one of those little short things that said, Instagram versus reality. And it was these, people showing like these beautiful destinations, like travel people. And then the reality of the exact same spot overrun with tourists. And, doing stupid stuff.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay,
Yeah, exactly.
I get it.
Yeah.
And it's just a reminder that just like our passages this week, may look great from the outside, but inside, not so good.
Closer
Anyway,
inspection.
we love you guys. So grateful for you. Stay tuned for all kind of great stuff coming up this summer. Man, we have a full slate of guest preachers coming in, and you'll be here for a lot of that as well.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I
I'll
know
be in
your
and out a
mission-
lot. Yeah, for sure.
so
we
I'm
will
pumped.
say there can be a save the date. The last week of October, Amy and I are planning to host, it's already in the works, to host a marriage retreat. Details to follow, but block out those dates. It's the last week. I think it'll be officially that last Monday of October, and then it will end officially that Thursday, which happens to be the 31st of October. People can stay early or late, but the event itself, marriage retreat, looking forward to that. Something we're looking at doing annually for our people.
Awesome. That'll be fun. That'll be fun. We love you guys. Hope you have a great week. We'll see you soon.